Chapter 3 Dead Time. The winding stream of Dust Bowl jalopies eventually reached Tehachapi Grade. It is a beautiful road that snakes gently through the Tehachapi Mountains of California, then shoots straight down to the San Joaquin Valley like a dangerous ski slope. For the Okie families who descended the grade, it was a time of rejoicing and laughter. All of their troubles suddenly seemed to disappear, for now they could see with their own eyes what they had only dreamed about for months, sometimes years. From 2,000 feet above sea level, they saw a vast stretch of orchards, endless fields of grapes, cotton, and tomatoes, and as far as the eye could see in any direction, green. So much green, it was hard to believe after life in the Panhandle. It was paradise, Trice Masters recalled. When we saw the valley, we started hollerin' and yellin' because we knew it was California. We started singing and we didn't care. If we ran out of gas, we'd make it because we could coast down. When Patsy Lamb's family saw the valley for the first time through the windshield of their old Model A Ford, her father pulled the car off to the side of the road on a high bluff. Patsy and her 4 brothers and sisters got out of the car and stood in a line on the edge of the bluff, where they stared at the sea of green below them, as if in a trance. Patsy was 10 years old at the time. When she turned away from the bluff, she saw her mother standing behind her, crying. Then Patsy started to cry, and soon everyone was crying. From 1935 to 1940, an endless stream of ramshackle cars and trucks rolled down Tehachapi Grade. Patsy Lamb's family and the other migrants from the Dust Bowl states poured into agricultural towns in the southern end of the San Joaquin Valley, Delano and Bakersfield, where the advertisements said grape pickers were needed, Wasco and Shafter, where it was said field hands were needed for potatoes, Arvin and Lamont, where rumor had it that work could be found harvesting cotton, carrots, and beans. But the Okies soon discovered they had been misled about California. They started seeing signs at the edge of every town they approached. No jobs here. If you were looking for work, keep out. 10 men for every job. Everywhere they went, it was the same. Too many workers and not enough jobs. The growers in California had advertised for more workers than they actually needed, so there was a surplus of farm labor. This suited the growers because the excess of workers drove wages down. A grower would offer to hire someone for 25 cents an hour to pick cotton, a poverty wage. If the migrant didn't take the job because his family couldn't live on 25 cents an hour, there were 1,000 other workers who would pick cotton for 25 cents an hour to keep their families from starving. The growers offered 35 cents an hour for plums and nectarines, 20 cents for potatoes and lettuce, and a starvation wage of 2.5 cents for a box of peaches. $1 for a ton of peaches. The average field hand worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and earned $4 a week. But most Okie laborers couldn't find work for even a nickel a day. What California had to offer the Okies was more hunger and misery. In a pamphlet John Steinbeck wrote before publishing The Grapes of Wrath, he described the hardships of the Okies faced during their first few months in California. He called it dead time. There is no work. First, the gasoline gives out, and without gasoline, a man cannot go to a job if he could get one. Then the food goes, and then it rains. With insufficient food, the children develop colds because the grounds in the tents are wet. I talked to a man last week who lost 2 children in 10 days with pneumonia. His face was hard and fierce, and he didn't talk much. During dead time, the Okies lived in the bottoms of dry lakes, such as Kern Lake and Buena Park Lake, in tents and shacks made out of cardboard and tin. Others lived on ditch banks, under bridges, and in fields of weed and rock. These squatter communities became known as Little Oklahomas or Okievilles, and the people who lived in them had no work and nothing to eat except boiled cabbage and cornbread. California was one of the richest agricultural states in the nation, yet Okie children were starving. The farms often produced more than could be picked or sold, but if the Okies tried to help themselves to the surplus crop left on the ground, the growers might pour oil on the food, strike a match, and set the crop on fire, hoping the Okies would move on to another town. John Steinbeck saw this happen several times and called it the saddest, bitterest thing of all. Inevitably, disease broke out in the Okievilles scattered throughout the San Joaquin Valley. The bad sanitary conditions and inadequate diet led to epidemics of dysentery, tuberculosis, and pneumonia. "Even if we found work," one squatter said, "the people starved. We lived like animals." The stories Okies tell about living in the squalor and filth of these camps are shocking and tragic. For example, when Nelda Oldham and her 7-month-old brother arrived in California from Ringling, Oklahoma, both fell ill with dysentery. Nelda recovered in 5 days, just in time to attend her brother's funeral. 6 months after arriving in California, Lillian Dunn's 17-month-old son, Donald Ray, ate a frostbitten orange that was part of the family's wages for working in an orange grove. Donald got sick, and Lillian took him to Tulare County Hospital for treatment. But the hospital said it didn't take Okies and refused to admit him. Donald died. Eventually, a rumor spread throughout the squatter camps, a rumor that, if true, might lead to a better life for the Okies. It was said that the federal government was building several farm labor camps where Okies could live until they found work. It was one of the few rumors Okies heard in California that turned out to be true. In 1936, the Farm Security Administration, an agency of the Department of Agriculture, started to build 12 camps in the San Joaquin Valley. By 1937, 10 of these camps had been completed. They were built to provide the Okies with emergency shelter and better living conditions. One of these compounds was named Arvin Federal Camp, located at the base of Tehachapi Grade, about 15 miles south of Bakersfield, near the towns of Arvin and Weed Patch. Because it was situated on Weed Patch Highway, the Okies called this place Weed Patch Camp. So did John Beck in The Grapes of Wrath. When the Okies heard the rumor about the camp, they knocked down their cardboard shacks, packed their pots, pans, wash tubs, and mattresses once again, and headed back to the foothills of the Tehachapi Mountains, where they had first seen California through tears of joy. Weed Patch Camp was no paradise, but for the families who settled there, it was a vast improvement over life in an Okieville. The camp housed about 300 people in one-room tin cabins and tents on wooden platforms. It cost $1 a week to live there, but if a family didn't have $1, and many didn't, they could work off the cost of rent by doing maintenance work around the camp. Jason Johnson traded his car jack for a tank of gas, which he used to find 2 days' work unloading lumber from a railroad car. He made $1.50, enough to move his family into the camp. Patsy Lamb's family got in by selling 10 sacks of potatoes her family had somehow acquired. The camp had hot showers, flush toilets, and breakfast for the children for 1 penny a day. Their parents could earn this much by finding occasional work in the fields or by doing odd jobs in Arvin and Lamont. On those occasions, when the Okies weren't paid in money, they worked for a cup of flour and a spoonful of lard, which would make biscuits for the family meal. When it rained, the tents and tin cabins leaked and Weed Patch Camp turned into a swamp of mud. Weeks might go by without finding even the poorest paying job. But friendships were strong in the camp, and someone would always share a standard meal of bean and biscuit. Life seemed a bit better, too, because right in the middle of Weed Patch Camp, there was a makeshift auditorium constructed of scrap lumber that was used as a dance hall on Saturday nights. Here, families would gather to sing and pick, playing an odd assortment of instruments that clattered and twanged: spoon, washboard, saw, and of course banjo, harmonica, fiddle, and guitar. They sang the Okie tunes that gave them identity and strength, for the people in Weed Patch Camp had learned to accept hardship without showing weakness. Now, come on, everybody quit that complaining, one woman said. Every cloud has a silver lining. If you don't like things here in camp, be nice enough to keep it to yourself.